Hello class, good afternoon. I hope you're fine. Let's begin with the class activities for unit number 9. Esta primera parte de la unidad número 9 es lo que estaremos checando, dándoles información respecto a esta, datos sobre la gramática y posteriormente dejándoles actividades. Let's begin with this unit number 9. Firstly, let's have a look of clauses and phrases showing contrast and exception. That's the first part that we got for the grammar. The first part of the grammar and the information. Antes de esto, pues, let's have a look on your books on page number 70. With this, we begin unit number 3. What we're going to check, generally speaking. Lesson A, how typical are you? The starting point, it's what's typical. First, we have a contrast about a typical Italian person and the typical Japanese person. Es decir, contrastando unos con otros. What are the typical of them? What characteristics they have in each forms. So that's to begin with. Contrasting two typical characteristics of these people. The typical Italian person, they tell us about how much water they drink. So the typical Italian person drinks 155 liters of bottled water per year. And in contrast, the typical Japanese person drinks only 10 liters of bottled water per year. Ahí está. Contrast on the left and contrast on the right. The typical Italian person consumes 3.2 kilograms of coffee per year, while the Japanese person consumes 1.4 kilograms of coffee per year. It's not that typical for them. In contrast, the typical Italian person consumes 0.1 kilograms of tea per year, while the typical Japanese person consumes only the difference of 0.9 kilograms of tea per year. That is almost 1 kilogram of tea. And among other information that's found on page number 70 to contrast them. The source is nationalmaster.com. After this information, firstly, you need to complete these statements. Use the information from the chart. That is, observe and contrast. What is the missing information that you need to add in order to complete the lines provided below in the empty spaces? Remember, read again and do the activities. Page number 70. Then, the second activity, it's about speaking. That's just a typical. What are typical examples of these things in your hometown? A store, a home, a job, a car, a snack food, a weekend activity. Well, we're gonna discuss this and other activities later on the face-to-face class. Then we gotta look on page number 71. On 71, we're gonna find the grammar. But before we continue, let's have a look on the sentences with the slides. Here in these slides, we can see clauses and phrases showing contrast and exception. That's the grammar we're gonna develop firstly. And afterwards, we'll continue with certain vocabulary and exercises. On page 71, we find these clauses and phrases showing contrast and exception using the words while, unlike, and in contrast to in order to present contrasting information, especially in writing. So estas palabras nos van a ayudar para mostrar contraste en escritura. Sobre todo ese es el énfasis. See what expressions are used for presenting contrasting information when we write text. Dado que hemos visto ciertas partículas de cómo escribir y elaborar nuestros textos, bueno, ahora escribiremos estas partes de how to express and show an exception. The words are while, unlike, in contrast to, and other expression not mentioned there, but in the additional grammar, whereas. Whereas. This is more formal in order to present information. The definition in Spanish are presented, and let's have a look on the examples put into practice. Sentence number 1 and sentence number 2. Firstly, while the typical Italian person studies until the age of 22, the typical Japanese person studies until the age of 24. Number 2, unlike the Japanese, Italians seems to drink a lot of bottled water, and in contrast to Italians, the Japanese travel a lot more by rail. These are the characteristics contrasting. And remember that at the beginning of this unit, we were checking contrasting information between a typical Italian person and in contrast with the typical Japanese person. This is in order to show contrasts. And what expressions can you use? You can use while, unlike, in contrast to, and whereas. Whatever you prefer to use, and of course the meaning that you want to provide, you use the specific words for doing so. Now, specifically on the examples, notice that there are two clauses or sentences que precisamente son conectadas por esa coma. You begin these sentences with the expressions of contrast, while, unlike, and in contrast to. Antes de la segunda oración, inmediatamente ponemos una coma. And the second sentence. Para eso nos ayudan estas expresiones. To show contrast. Precisamente poniendo el énfasis a while, unlike, and in contrast to. Asimismo, podrías usar whereas. Whereas, depending on the kind of writing exercise you're having, you're going to use them. Finally, the notice. Notice the use of a comma before connecting the second clause or sentence. Siempre es necesario. Para eso usaremos estas expresiones, while, unlike, and in contrast to. Asimismo, whereas. Te ayuda a poner dos oraciones contrastando una información A con información B, o oración 1 con oración 2, separadas por una coma, y ahí las tienes. En este otro color se marcan las oraciones 2, y en verde pues ya no puse más líneas, simplemente se entiende, creo yo, que empiezas con while, unlike, and in contrast to. Todo esto para llevar a tu escrito la información de contrastar, haciendo una excepción en algo. Contrast and exception. Para eso nos sirven estas cláusulas, conectando dos cláusulas en una oración. All of this is found on page number 71. La primera parte mostrándonos estas formas. Podremos decir más ejemplos con whereas. We use whereas to say that something is true of one of the things, but it is not true of another. Es decir, para una parte sí es cierto, pero no para otra. In the examples, why are some cancers curable whereas others are not? Es decir, porque sí ciertos cánceres son curables, tratables, y otros no, que no se curan al 100%, sino que vives con ellos hasta su consumo de la persona. Mientras que, the teacher gave you an A, whereas I got a B. O sea, aquí mostrando la información de calificaciones, como te decía en las otras clases, de grading A or B. O sea, porque tú tienes 10 y yo 9. We use while to introduce information which contrasts with something we have said in the main class. Por ejemplo, the first car is made in Korea, while the second one is manufactured in Japan. En este caso, como no está iniciando la oración, simplemente lo ponemos ahí, en medio, while the second one. Y, while the teacher gave you an A, I got a B. En este caso, while, debo de cambiarlo con una coma. It's missing a comma. Y ahí lo tenemos. mostrando el énfasis cuando empezamos las oraciones. Using while, using as, in contrast, using while, unlike, in contrast to y whereas. Additional examples of them. Ahí está. ¿Cuál vas a usar? Depende de qué énfasis quieras darle o qué tan relevante es tu texto o qué tanta formalidad quieres usar en tu texto. Depending. One more time of this. On the other hand, misma página, 71, use except that, except for, and except for the fact that to show an exception. So, todo esto son otros ejemplos de mostrar una excepción. Ya contrastamos la información a diferencia de demás expresiones. Bueno, ahora para agregar una excepción. De entre todos hay una excepción or excepciones. So these are except that, except for, and except for the fact that. The examples. She likes going to most sports events, except tennis matches. Decidí no ponerle that porque no es tan relevante. Mientras que to, the brothers are very alike, except that Mark is slightly taller than Kevin. Contrastando dos hermanos, Mark and Kevin. Bien, y ahí lo tenemos contrastando la información de estos dos hermanos. Number 3. I like all fruit except for oranges. Es decir, excluyendo las naranjas que no me gustan. That's an example only. 4. We'll all be at the party except for Luisa, who's away in Berlin this weekend. Y ahí los tienes. The exception. Finally, 5. The Japanese people typically consume less coffee, except for the fact that they drink more tea. There you go. So, dependiendo que quieras usar, we use the expressions listed, except that, except for the fact that. Whatever you want to use to show an exception. En una exclusión, excepción en el grupo. Mientras que los anteriores eran estas frases para mostrar contraste. Clauses and phrases showing contrast. Se les llaman cláusulas, acuérdate su nombre técnico para conectar oraciones. Dos oraciones en la misma cláusula. O dos oraciones en la misma. Oración 1, oración 2. Mientras que estas otras palabras nos ayudan a agregar excepciones, dando contrastes de que esto es verdadero excepto por. So that's the information that we got. Alright, then we got some adjectives with their definitions. Bueno, estos les voy a agregar el significado para que lo tengas. Y también estos expressions to communicate locations. Bueno, entonces vamos a detenernos y ponerle el significado y al final vemos ellos. See you in a moment. Alright, so that's about the grammar. Now, on next page, 72, we find the following vocabulary: adjectives, verbs, and phrases. All of these need to be used in the corresponding category. The adjectives are amenable, conservative, rebellious, conventional, and unconventional, while the verbs are accept, conform to, confront, stand up to, and stand up for. While finally, we got the phrases: be your own person, fit in, follow the crowd, and make waves. All of these are the expressions used in order to classify them in the following categories. Let me just change this. And on 72, one more time, are these adjectives, verbs, and phrases related to accepting things as they are or to making changes? Put them in the correct columns. Now that you have the definition, the information already used, your activity is to do the activities over there. Accepting things as they are. Put them and classify them correspondingly. Which of these are accepting things as they are and which are for making changes? On 72. That's what you're gonna do afterwards. By the way, on the previous exercises as well, we're going to make sentences on 71. I forgot to mention. On 71, you're going to do these exercises mentioned over there. So on 70, let me change this. Ahí está. Now we got the exercises. Again on 71, the exercises. Okay, and that's enough about the grammar. After these examples, well, I hope you get the ideas clarified, better understandable with this information already shown, and if not, you need to review the grammar. Or, on the other hand, you may take notes and write write me as soon as possible to clarify you any possible doubts that you may have. Y si no, pues bueno, estarías listo para la siguiente actividad, the exercises. Part B. Here's some information about customs. How are they different in other places, specifically in this country or in our city? Write sentences showing contrast and indicating exceptions. You need to read and rewrite the sentences on the part B and the part C. If the space is limited on your books, I suggest you to do these exercises on your notebooks, please. But don't forget it. This is in order to practice the two topic sentences found on the same page 71. The vocabulary related to clauses and phrases showing contrast and exception. Use the vocabulary provided, while, unlike, in contrast to, and if you want, whereas. And the second part, using additional contrast, except that, except for the fact that. Follow the examples previously shown and write your own ideas. Recuerda, puedes hacerlo ahí en tu libreta o si está muy limitado el espacio, puedes hacerlo que no sea en tu libro, sino que en una libreta. Please. Exercises B and C, dependiendo qué énfasis quieras dar, de contraste or exception. You decide what is best en cada uno de ellos, con la cultura mexicana or about the city. And now we have the following vocabulary on page 72. Adjectives, verbs, and phrases. Each of these phrases are classified and you already have the definitions. Amenable, conservative, rebellious, conventional, unconventional. All of these are category of adjectives. Verbs, accept, conform to, confront, stand up to, stand up for. And finally, the last category are phrases. Be your own person, fit in, follow the crowd, and make waves. What you're gonna do after that, it's to the same page, classify each of these phrases of adjectives, verbs, or phrases in the corresponding category for accepting things as they are or making changes. These are going to be contrast and we're going to be check them together next time that we are in face-to-face classes. All right? And let's do that activity as well. On the other hand, I'm going to move ahead on the page number 74, which are collocations, expressions that go on the keep and stay. Sometimes these expressions are used together with no exception, and some others they are different. Firstly, we have keep things in perspective, keep or stay connected, and as well you can say keep or stay in touch. You can say stay awake mainly, but you can also say keep up with current events. You can keep or stay out of trouble, keep expenses down, and finally keep or stay in touch, and as well keep stay connected with the following definitions on 74. Those are the expressions that you have them. Oh, I wrote a typo. I committed a typo. This is the information, and I think that's it. You can understand the meaning, and you need to do this. You need to connect the correct letter with the definition on 74. Put the correct letter. Number one, it's already done, so you move ahead on the following and subsequent ones. That is the 74. Expressions with keep and stay match the phrases to make questions. Notice the expressions with keep and stay. Remember, these are called collocations, special words that are followed together. That's the natural way how in English occur. Expressions with keep, expressions with stay. Sometimes you can combine them, sometimes you can't. 74. So do this other activity. And finally, my friends, it's missing the sections of the reading for pages 65 and 73. They are the ones that are missing. And regarding of the books, nada más para verificar qué actividades y puedas ir marcando. Regarding of the books, dijimos entonces, the beginning of this unit, solamente abarcaré la primera parte, la segunda parte la veremos en clase, asimismo la parte de reading. Reading, Comprehension and Writing, que van de la mano, para hacer esas actividades y avanzarle bien. Bueno, so estuvimos checando what's typical at the beginning of this lesson, the contrasting the typical Italian person versus the typical Japanese person. Regarding of the speaking on the 70, la vamos a hacer en clase. Primera actividad marcada, les dije, la parte B de estas 70. Complete these sentences using the vocabulary mentioned above. Toda la información que está arriba la tienes para completar los espacios vacíos en las líneas. 70, esa es la primera actividad. Mientras que on 71 les mostraba lo del grammar, desglosado, despedazado en dos partes. What expressions are used to contrast and what expressions are used to show exceptions, además de las actividades B y C de tarea. Number 4, discussion. Are you typical? Ese también lo tendremos de discusión on 71, así que la dejamos. Whereas on 72, lo que les decía, vocabulary. Should I just go with the flow? You need to, after checking the vocabulary of the phrases with adjectives, verbs, and phrases, you need to classify them in one of the two categories. También lo de group discussion lo haremos en clase. Listening, how are they different? Esto va a quedar de tarea con el audio. Quería ponérselos, pero debido a que me encuentro en un lugar con bastante ruido, se los voy a dejar de tarea con el audio. Les voy a adjuntar página 72 con el audio. Finally, 73. Con eso terminamos el apartado Supporting Statements. Esto lo vamos a dejar para la clase siguiente, face to face. Supporting Statements, cómo crear Supporting Statements, se los explico después en clase. Y la última parte que hicimos o que vamos a completar es esto, Vocabulary on 74. What expressions are related to keep and stay? ¿Vale? We have a reading. Y ese también lo checaremos en clase por si hay vocabulario que verificar. Entonces nos quedaría pendiente lo que es la segunda parte del grammar. Past habitual with used to and would. Estos ejercicios y además los mostrados que les decía era la parte de reading y writing. 65 and 73 los haremos en la siguiente clase. Bueno, hasta ahí le vamos a parar con esta mini explicación Recuerda, lo que busco es en cada clase ver solamente un tema gramatical, desglosarlo bien y cierto vocabulario. No irme con dos temas gramaticales para que sea mejor práctica. Si necesitas más práctica del grammar, te sugiero entonces que vayas con la 122 y hagas esta sección about the phrases, clauses and phrases showing contrast in exception, la primera parte, porque la segunda es sobre el otro tipo gramatical. Bueno, ahí lo tienes. Entonces, queda de tarea eso, les mando el audio y las diapositivas junto con el video. Que estén muy bien, chicos. Have an excellent weekend. See you next Saturday, hopefully. Bye, take care.